This is The Bagel Report, a podcast exploring Jewish representation and identity in popular culture, with your hosts Esther Kostanowitz and Aaron Ben Moshe, and now a production of J, the Jewish News of Northern California. Aaron, we are here. We didn't think we would be here, but now we're here.
Yeah, here we are in a room full of strangers. That's a Bee Gees reference.
Oh, yeah, the Bee Gees were keeping you company fitting. At work the other day, right? Isn't that?
They're in my brain.
All right.
But nonetheless, we are here today to talk about a lot of good things.
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel's finale. It's
I know.
over, friends.
I know. Okay.
We're going to get to all of the emotions about everything and all of our hot takes and everything. But before we get started, we also want to just acknowledge the listeners who wrote in with their hot takes about this show. And in taking a cue from Midge, she wasn't shy Baldwin. She wasn't shy about asking for what she needed and deserved. So in that spirit, hey, why not subscribe to our podcast right now so you never miss an episode? Just an idea.
And if you're into rating podcasts on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us, we recommend you give us 5 stars or at least leave us a comment. And if you're going to give us 4 stars, tell us what we can improve on.
And if you're going to give us 1 star, please forget how to use Apple Podcasts, or at least how to comment on Apple Podcasts.
Yes. And of course, you can always leave us comments, questions, and suggestions on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can email us at thebagelreport@gmail.com.
That's great. Aaron, are we done with our self-promotion now?
Oh, God, I hope so. Okay, let's move on to Maisel.
Yes, let's. But wait a minute. Do we have to warn them about spoilers? Maybe we should. I mean, it's over. So we're going to be talking about everything. All episodes are available on Prime Video if you haven't listened to them yet, if you haven't watched them yet. So if you haven't watched, what should they do, Aaron?
I think if you haven't watched, you should watch. I mean, I think if you don't care about spoilers and you want us to pitch you why we think you should watch it, then I think you should hear spoilers.
So now, our reflections on season 5, as well as on the show as a whole. This is your last chance to turn back if you want to not be spoiled. Are you with us?
I say they listened to the podcast. They knew what they were getting involved with. I say let them know.
Oh, it's that kind of concern for our listeners that we exhibit here at the Bagel Report. Okay, take it away, Aaron.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, all right. There's too much. So let me sum up. Okay.
Sum up.
Once upon a time in the land of Hollywood, or the Upper West Side, on March 17th, 2017, the first episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel premiered on Amazon Prime. The series would go on to win 84 awards for acting, writing, directing, cinematography, costumes, casting, music, and production design. And Midge Weissman Maisel, who continues to call herself Mrs. Maisel as a stage name for her entire career,
even though she's divorced.
Through it. Yes, divorced, then married, then divorced again. She kept the name. And we've compiled a few examples of her career for you that got us where we are today. She used brisket as currency to bribe a comedy club to give her stage time, or her husband stage time.
She got
the rabbi to come to Yom Kippur break fast.
She was arrested.
She was arrested with Lenny Bruce multiple times. She worked her way from the Gaslight to Paris to the Catskills to Florida and Vegas. She performed for the USO, outed her friend, and got kicked off a tour all in one season.
Nice job, Midge. Nice job.
She saw the inside of Carnegie Hall and decided to do things her own way and ended up at a strip club.
So relatable. I mean, we've all been there.
She tried her hand in a writer's room and wrote successful bits for Princess Margaret.
Don't forget the twirling, Aaron. She twirled in pink dresses on the streets of New York and Miami and Paris, etc. A lot of twirling. And she found her soulmate in a seedy East Village cafe. And the soulmate wasn't a dude.
Thank God.
It wasn't a romantic partner. So it was really nice. We're going to talk about all this stuff very, very soon. Mm-hmm. But as far as Maisel and the Bagels are concerned, which is I know why you're here, this is really the end of an era for us.
It is.
Yeah, initially, Aaron and I bonded over The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We both watched it and thought it was like amazing and so odd and incredibly Jewish. And it was just something that we connected over.
It's also crazy too, because at the time, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend was still on and we were bonding over that as well. So the fact that these two shows that really connected us for a long time are over, and yet there's like so much more ahead for us. It's like the end of one chapter and then the starting of like a new book.
Yeah, we're going to have to find something else that we both love in equal measure and that it's super Jewy to cover. Feel free to submit your recommendations to us at the Bagel Report.
Yeah. I don't know. It also feels like emotional on like a professional level too, because I watched the first, I've talked about this before, but I watched the first season in college as I was graduating. And then it felt like all of a sudden I was in LA and working, and I got to talk about Maisel, not just as like a fan, but professionally. And I got to critique it, and I got to interview so many of the casting crew from the show. And I just can't believe that just in the 5 years that it's existed, like it was truly like one of the shows that I just latched onto because I felt so seen by it, but also I got to interact with the actors who played some of our favorite characters.
Yeah, you were really involved in this in a whole different way. And the show really accompanied you as you grew as a journalist and, changed jobs and started new projects. Like, it's really, I can understand. It's like, it was really like a companion for you. And now it's over. Sorry.
Now it's over. Womp womp.
Yeah.
But it's okay because we still get to talk about it, and we haven't even talked about it yet. So
right. So it sparked a lot of conversation about Jewish representation. That's one of the things one of the points that we bonded over was the fact that this was so Jewy and Jewish, not just because they were a family living in New York on the Upper West Side and they got the rabbi for Yom Kippur, but like beyond that, they ended up having Tisha B'Av, the fast day that happens during the summer that no one ever puts on TV. There were a ton of Yiddish songs that kind of scored the soundtrack. And, it was really interesting to see Jews on the Upper West Side during this time period and try to understand what that reality of that world was. And I've been in a couple of conversations about Maisel where there are people in their, over 70 or so, 60s or 70s, and they grew up in or around this time period, or their parents did. And they said that it was really, like, some people were saying that it was 100% accurate. Like, they remembered things like that happening. They remembered the look and the fashion, et cetera. And then other people are like, that's not even remotely the way it was. So, anytime you can hit both of those, you're doing a good job with the specificity of the world you're creating.
Yeah. And that brings us to May 26, 2023, when we saw Midge get her 4 minutes of fame on the Gordon Ford Show. So today, the Bagels are saying thank you and good night to the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oy, here we go.
Okay.
So we're going to try to do this as quickly, as efficiently as possible.
Yes.
So we have a bunch of different categories of types of things we want to share with you. So the first one, we want to talk about our favorite moments from the finale. So Erin's going to go first because she had a super emotional reaction to it.
I did. It was okay. I cried. I watched it a couple times because the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, it's a fluke. And then I watched it again and I still cried. It felt very satisfying in terms of a finale. And of course, I think people say there's so many things that weren't answered, but I think the most important things were answered in this finale. We really do see the moment and the epilogue of these characters. And I really thought it was emotionally satisfying. So if you also cried, please reach out at TBR the Pod or at the Bagel Report to validate my feelings. Very much appreciated.
Erin needs community during this time.
But I don't know. I guess the first thing that I really liked from the finale was Abe. Was Abe and his pride. Like, we really did get to see such a transformation even in the last few episodes of this season. I think seeing her scramble and try and get to him specifically only to say Dad, I got it. I'm going to be on the show tonight. And he's just incredibly proud of her is really emotional. I know that feeling personally, like when you get something big and you call your parents and you just want them to be proud and then they are. Like, that's all you really want in life, right? You just want to make your loved ones proud of you, right? Just even a little bit. And so the fact that it just feels so real and like it's a visceral thing, like I was just like, wow, okay, this is it. This is it.
Yeah. I loved also that he processed it with his friends, like that he was sitting and he was really doing his cerebral Abe thing, where he was really sitting with it and thinking about it and trying to figure out how he felt and then how to articulate it. It's a process. And I thought Tony Shalhoub did an amazing job with this character overall. He was consistently entertaining, but also these kinds of serious moments he does really well, in addition to the comedy of Abe and his ridiculousness in various situations. Especially if you go back to episode 1 when Abe and Rose are just bickering parents, and it's like the patter is like da 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 da, and it's just like about establishing the rhythm of who they are rather than really going in depth about how they look at the world. It's more like these are the parents and they're acting like parents. And so this was an opportunity for him to grow. You know, he's not the person who likes to shut himself up in a room with a piano rather than have an actual conversation with anyone. He's grown. He's got friends. He's got a career that engages him creatively. And he's got true earned character growth, which can be very moving if it's done properly. And I think it was.
I agree. And I don't know I don't know if we intentionally did this, but I feel like we're getting all of our favorite male moments out of the way now. So then we can like bulldoze into all the female moments in this season. But my other favorite moment was the return of Lenny. I think a lot of people, including us, we wanted to see movement with him because we know that he's a real character based on real things that happened in the 60s. And so I think this scene essentially was a death without seeing a death. And it kind of bookends the 6 months prior too. And it's, you know, with the fortune cookie, like I just love seeing it's tragic because the show basically goes back in time. We see where he's going and how horrible that is for Midge to see and for Susie to try and rally. And it's just not happening for him anymore. And also, we see the ending very hopeful, that he is proud of her, that he knows she's going to succeed. And also, I don't know if you noticed this, but when we see him in the first episode, he's carrying a briefcase full of like lawyer documents. And then in the end, he's reading all of these documents, but they're more, right? Because time had passed since 1961 to 66. So we just see it's like he's still hanging on to these lawyer papers. And it's like, it's really tragic, but also really beautiful.
I didn't see that, but yes, Luke Kirby as Lenny Bruce has been amazing in this series, and he's a fan favorite. He's one of our favorites, and you know we've always been on this path toward his death because the real Lenny Bruce died, and so we were wondering how they were going to handle that. There was even kind of like a call at the end of the penultimate episode, I think it was, where Midge gets a call at the Gordon Ford show. And I was like, oh my God. And Aaron, you and I were like, oh my God, is it Lenny? Is he dead? Is Lenny? No. Oh my God. But it wasn't. And
quick aside, if you do want to know what it is, thank God to the costume continuity department, because where we end at the end of 8 into 9, she's running to go pick up Susie, who was in jail. And I didn't catch it because obviously we're not binging it. It comes out a week apart, but I just thought, oh my God, she's in the same costume when she ran out. And also theoretically, this is all the same day. Woof. Okay. Yeah, anyway, back to the point on Lenny.
Yeah. So I looked up an article in Entertainment Weekly where they talked more about Lenny Bruce as a character and how they tried to integrate some of his reality into this reality of the Maisel verse, as we've dubbed it. And Alex Borstein, who plays Susie, said that she was interpreting the scene in this way. She said, I was sent there on a fool's errand by Midge to try to save him. Midge knows what's coming. She sees the writing on the wall, and I was sent in to try to pull him out from the devil's mouth. She didn't want him to know it was her doing it. She felt like he wouldn't respond to her. What I took from it is that she's made many attempts. She's sending in Susie to see if there's a last hope. And Kirby said about playing Lenny Bruce is that the thing that they really adhered to in terms of his history is that the real Lenny Bruce, they adhered to the real Lenny Bruce was his performances. And that's when they were doing him verbatim. Like they didn't change. You don't mess with Lenny Bruce's routines. But when he was inside the story of Mrs. Maisel, he was a little bit free from his history. So thought that was interesting.
I love that because I also, it's not, sometimes in interviews when they're saying what they were thinking, you don't always see it. And it's like, I don't know, it's also very hard because I'm thinking like, I totally see everything that they're saying. I feel like that's what we got from that scene in the beginning.
Yeah, agreed. Now that we've talked about the men, we should go back to talk about one of my important moments that if I wasn't really crying, but I almost was crying. So we have to celebrate these emotional moments for me when I have them.
Yes.
So the episode where Susie was being roasted at the Friars Club, what do they call it? It was like
the Testa-roastrial.
Testa-roastrial, right. You know, there were all of her comedy friends / colleagues in the room, and they intercut her being honored and the standard roast style roasting of her and her career and the way she looks and she dresses and all that kind of stuff. But it was a night to honor Susie as a legend. And she was somebody who people told stories about her, showbiz stories, with fear and reverence and admiration. And her ascendance to manager superstardom was narrated by a bunch of people in the room just talking to each other, trying to share, oh, I heard she did this. I heard she did that. No, that's not the way the story ran at all. And I loved that. It was a real coffee clutch of dudes talking about this amazing woman and what she'd been able to accomplish in their field. And it's also that night also marks the beginning of Susie and Midge returning to each other after having been in a fallout. They had a fallout for many years. And there were even comments from people that were not allowed to say her name, but we all know who she worked for. And so then when there is like a coming back together, it's magic. And when Susie cries, I basically cry. Like it can be really hard about it. But it's when Susie has an emotional moment, that's when I start crying too.
Yeah, it was just a really great episode that also sets up the finale really well. Like we could have easily gone from that episode into the finale. I'm glad we didn't because there were still other things we needed to see. But it was, those two episodes together are brilliant episodes. Also, I feel like they were the Scorsese, like Spielberg-y episodes. Like there were so many things where I'm like, oh, this is it. This is like this very classy, cool, like mobster, also like style of filmmaking, which is very cool. And you get to see Imogene. Like Imogene is like finally peppered into the roast episode. And then we see her again briefly in the series finale. And I want to talk about this for a minute because Imogene is just like a supportive friend, but she's kind of not been there a lot this season. But when she comes back, what she's wearing, and again with the costumes, they mean something. They're so smart. Like when we see her, she's sitting in the crowd at the Gordon Ford show, and she's wearing a beatnik beret, and she's like, Midge, and she's like pointing to the beret. Now, many people may not remember this because it's been a while since we've seen it, but the first time we see her wearing this beret is in the pilot when the couples go out to see Joel perform. And that's the night where he's got holes in his shirt and it's Ted the Moth and he botches it. It's a bad performance. And it's at the Gaslight, right? And this style of the beatnik style is so different from their life on the Upper West Side that she like feels she needs to dress like a cool cat, right?
She's so excited to do something different and to wear something different.
Yeah. And so like that's their going out outfit. And so the next time we see her in it is for Midge who's the real comedian. It just feels like this full circle moment. And it just feels so exciting that like she's rightfully wearing it for her friend. And it should have always been worn for her. And I just love that they kept that detail.
Yeah. And Bailey DeYoung, who plays Imogene, does such a great job with this character over the course of the series. But if you want a real treat, go back to I think it's the first episode where she and Midge take an exercise class together.
Yeah.
And they have this whole long conversation while executing this exercise that makes them look ridiculous. They don't, lose their breath or anything. And it's really a remarkable feat for both of them. It's athleticism, it's verbal acuity, it's really everything. And it just makes me laugh. And there have been times over the course of these seasons that there have been other exercise classes that they've been in or dance classes that they've had to have conversations at the same time you're doing that. And it's really, she was just consistently entertaining and funny and just really so good.
And there's also like great callbacks. If you go back and watch season 1 and then you watch season 5, there's some really great moments of eye rolling or, oh my God, I can't believe they remembered this, which I encourage you to do because I think that's what makes the rewatch really great. I think we should give a shout out to one of our listeners who gave us some of their thoughts.
Do we have to say should we say their names? Some of them I think wrote to us anonymously. Maybe we should just thank them all at the end of the episode, or we can just say thank you. You know who you are. And if in the future you want your name said, please tell us and we'll say your name. Yeah, we just didn't want to if somebody has a hot take that they're embarrassed to talk about in shul, maybe we didn't want to out you in terms of that. We learned that from Midge. You're not supposed to out people before they're ready to be outed. So
yes. And well, I guess this is a lumping of a group because a couple people reached out to me and a couple people on our Facebook said that the lighting shift during the 4 minutes when Midge finally takes the stage and gives her stand-up bit. A lot of people said that when the light changed, it looked like the gaslight, as if she was performing again for the very first time. And I definitely don't think that was an accident. I think that was 100% intentional.
Yeah, this is a very tightly organized, scripted, and designed series, so everything is intentional. Which means that the ending, we're skipping to the end now. So really, if you haven't seen the last episode, turn back. But the ending that resists the more cliched, happy ending of they got married and lived happily ever after is also intentional, which I really appreciate.
Yes. And I think the overall build of the episode was one of my favorite things. There was this energy and momentum and my heart was pounding the whole time. What could possibly happen? Because they try and psych you out. They try and, Gordon tries to screw Midge one more time. And you're just oh no, everybody's here. Everybody in her life that means something is here for her, except for Moish for some reason. And everyone is there and you're like, oh, please don't mess this up. And then they give each other this look of, Susie, I'm just going to go for it. And Susie goes, okay, go for it. And then she says buckle up, Mikey. And it's it's great. It's just this great, satisfying moment. And then it's not even over. There are things that happen after. You would, in a normal show, maybe 15 years ago, the show would have just ended at that moment and blackout, right? But Amy Sherman Palladino, no. She and Dan were no, there's more to the story here. And we're going to save that for our favorite theme of the episode. But yeah, I think those are our favorite moments.
The mic scene was great. And you're the one who noted, I think it's all one take. It's a tracking shot, if that's what it's called. I don't know.
I think so. Okay. There's a scene, the Mike scene, where Susie's just yelling Mike, like a crazy person. And she's so
running
funny.
Across the office trying to find him.
Yeah. Yes. And the scene starts after the vertigo zoom onto Mike's face. But the second she goes up the stairs to his office, then they start walking together through a hallway, down the stairs, out into the Gordon Ford stage. And there might be a quick cut where there's an open of a curtain. But I was watching and it felt like one seamless take. And I love that. I love when shows try and do something like that because it's really impressive. And people notice. People are noticing the lights. People notice the details of the show. And I think that also is is a testament to like how every department of this show, not just the story, but it really all comes to life. And there's an energy there when you're not even cutting for something else.
Yeah. So in addition to that Mike scene in the office, I mean, Susie and Mike together is great. Not just because the actors are good, but I feel like they may have spent a lot of time together because Jason Ralph, who plays Mike, is married to Rachel Brosnahan. So it does feel like their kind of brother-sister, like, but also combative relationship is really fun to watch. And there's one scene with Susie and Mike that happens earlier in Midge's tenure at the Gordon Ford show, where Susie walks onto the live set of the show and has this conversation with Mike where they're not speaking words because they're on the air. So they're just mouthing it across and like miming it across the room at each other. And it's the mounting frustration that Mike feels and the mounting imperative that Susie has to make her client, be on his radar. And so it's just that part was also just really just electric. Loved it.
Yeah. I mean, everybody is so talented in this show, and it's you can tell that they've spent a lot of time together. And now moving on to our not so favorite moments. Esther, why don't you kick us off with this one?
Okay. How did you know that I would have criticisms of this show?
Because you were the one that said, I think we should also have a section for not so favorite moments.
That's a good point.
Which is fair.
Yes.
It's fair.
Yes. Well, you managed to come up with a few too. So it's not just me being the negative
Once you got my brain working, it won't turn off.
So the Midge almost wedding to Philip Roth. I get that it illustrated this relationship between Susie and Midge in terms of their codependence. And it also shows that Susie does all the dirty work when Midge is like, I can't even, just do it. And I didn't really love that. I feel like we could have done without it. And like the scene that I know you had a problem with, if without that scene, we could have had more time, like, let's say with adolescent Esther and Ethan, like, so that we know like how they were interacted with during the course of their growing up, as opposed to just when they were children and when they were adults. So that was something that I felt we could have done more with that space if it had been granted to other characters.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And it's also interesting too, because now both kids can talk and communicate with each other. And I think that would have been really interesting to see instead of just being in the background. Although it does fit with the time that children should be seen and not heard. So it's like a love-hate. It's like, I get it, but also it's like womp womp. And speaking of womp womp, I hated the industrial scene. Like, I love the history of industrial shows, and I wish we got like a glimpse of it, but we didn't actually get an entire full-fledged production. But even with that, I still really loved the tap dancing. Like, it's like, I want her to do a Broadway musical, and maybe this is just her like proof of concept episode to like do a show on Broadway, because I think she could do it.
Somebody actually wrote to me suggesting the same thing, that the next thing for Amy Sherman Palladino was going to be to bring this to Broadway. But it's not like something that can happen overnight. And she also has other shows that are, in the queue ahead of such an endeavor if she were to try it. But I feel like there have been these kind of like musical audition moments throughout the series. And, dancing, of course, is something that ASP has tackled before in Bunheads and other places. So,
yeah. And even in the Gilmore Girls revamp, there's still plenty of random Broadway moments. And you're like, in Stars Hollow, really? So maybe that's for her. But I feel like it could have been like shortened. Also, the episode intertwined with like the mob and the waste management being like a front for the mob. It just also feels like an Italian cliche that is just always assumed. And I felt like, come on, like they are like Amy and Dan are Jewish and Italian. And I feel like sometimes it's easier for them to do the cliche and then dive deep into something else instead of also dive deep into like the Jewish and Italian culture.
Yeah. I mean, I think if one ethnicity was the focus of this, it was obviously Judaism. And secondly, the Italian connection. But, the idea of Italians always representing mobsters is like not great. But I guess if she and Daniel share both Jewish and Italian heritage, that gives them the hechsher, the making it kosher, so that they can talk about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm iffy on the whole mob storyline in general. I wanted to know how the mob was involved in Susie's rise to power and whether she ever got out from under their thumb, or if from the second they came on the scene and got her that office until she's at the end of the series with Midge having retired, are they active that whole time? Is Susie really actually a criminal in some ways? Like, I felt like that wasn't sufficiently explained.
It was either leading to the fact that like she was always going to end up in trouble because for as ambitious as she was, she still had like demons with gambling and money and like how does she secure things? And so like it was always kind of this like inevitability for her, which is kind of tragic. But then also like she wraps Midge into it. And in order for Midge to be the one to get out, Joel has to step in. And so, or not, he doesn't have to do anything, but he voluntarily steps in because she's so oblivious to it, which is also kind of tragic, which is that like Midge still doesn't have control over her money, even though she is this independent person. There's always someone dealing with her finances, so she doesn't have to. I think that is like the importance of the mob. And a quick note on characters. I was really rooting for Rose. I just was on her. Like, I just felt she was underwhelming at the end of it. Like, a listener wrote in and said, the major thing that stuck out to her was the neurodiversity in this season. And that Midge and Esther, not you, Esther, have ADHD. Abe may have autism or maybe on the spectrum, and Rose is a narcissist.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I may also have ADHD. Like, we're talking about it. We'll see. But the whole lot of them are narcissists. So it's like narcissistic apples falling extremely close to the narcissism tree. Or like, you could call them like Nepo babies, but for narcissism. So
Narco babies?
Narcissa babies?
Narcissa babies?
It doesn't work.
I don't know. Like, there was just so much hope for her to like, be as independent and maybe like find common ground. But like it just felt like even in the end, the only thing she was excited about and touched by was that she got personally invited to the Gordon Ford show tonight. And it's like, really? Like that's the thing that you're still clinging to? Like there is a pride there, but it just felt lackluster to me.
Agreed. We never found out if the funnel cakes were delicious. That's my
never did.
hanging problem. No,
that's
but
for the reboot.
I think that part of it is that the way I understand it, scene at the Gordon Ford show was like the last one they shot.
Yes.
So I heard like Rachel Brosnahan and Alex Borstein talking about it on some, TV show or in the press junket or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's possible that because of scheduling, some of the people had different time slots available or different amounts of time available to this production at that point. So it could explain why Moish wasn't there. It could explain why we didn't get that much time with Rose. So I don't know exactly how to parse it, but that's also a possibility.
Yeah. And I think another one we collectively didn't really love was that during the 4 minutes, during her speech, she kind of retells the story of how she got here. And in doing so, she's still making fun of Penny Pan. And it's like, girl, at this point in your life, you have won. Do we really need to use this poor girl as a punching bag? Now, she's not completely innocent, right? Because she did get involved with like a married person, but also Joel initiated it, right? So like, let's use Joel as the punching bag because he also gave permission to do that.
That's right.
I don't know, what'd you think?
I agreed. It just didn't sit right with me that she was, saying her name. I think that the idea of saying that her husband was with somebody else and like that she was stupid and all of that stuff, I guess for me, that kind of thing would be fine if it's anonymous in a comedy routine. But, when she's talking about her talking to plants, and that is something that we see in one of the first episodes. I went back to watch it again. And she really is stupid. But is that something to make fun of? I don't know. It just felt kind of wrong. I don't love comedy that relies on punching down at people.
But also, like, I don't know, she's young. She definitely seemed like this young person that just didn't know what Midge knew. And also, to be fair, Midge also did not know much before she got here. She's like a couple steps ahead of Penny. So, like, maybe let's bring her along.
Right.
I don't know.
Midge is very quick. She may not know everything, but she's quick to talk about it, even if she doesn't. And, fun fact, people have said that talking to plants is actually good for their growth. So maybe Penny is smarter than we all realize. Just saying.
Yeah, maybe she's a great plant mom.
Yeah,
maybe.
She became like a horticulturist or something like that, botanist. Anyway, let's address some of our other listener comments.
Yes.
So in terms of the scenes that we thought could have been left out. So someone told you something about, which scene was that? The car?
Oh, someone did not like the car scene when they were looking for a cab. They thought it was
when Rose
way
and
too
Abe
long.
are trying to get to the studio and they're running through the streets, La La Land style. Yeah.
Yes. And they thought it was ridiculous and it was way too long and it didn't do anything. And I kind of agreed, but I was just here for the ride. I thought it was funny that Abe didn't understand why no one wanted his math tutoring resources. Like, there were little things in there that I thought were funny, but
you can't. Even in the 60s, you couldn't bargain to get a cab in New York City. Like, you can't do like a trade of goods for services. That doesn't work. But the visual of it was really interesting and really like made a visual impact to see them, kind of wandering this traffic where everybody's stopped and they're looking and nobody's willing to take them in a cab. And so you can just do it like they can go to one or two cabs and ask for a ride and we're off duty, and then Penny pan back. And, you'll see that that the whole thing's like a parking lot. So, it's that kind of thing. It would be very fun if it was like, 30 to 45 seconds long, but it went on for, I don't know, it felt like forever.
Yeah, it did feel, honestly, 30, 40 seconds feels long. Maybe that's how long it was. But yeah, I think after the whistle joke, I think we got to move on. So we agree with you, listener. Oh, okay. Someone sent you a very interesting message. You had a good back and forth with a listener.
Yes, we did.
What was that about?
Right. So the question was whether the Sherman Palladino is intended for Zelda, who is the housekeeper, I guess.
Ex-housekeeper,
Maisel's. I don't know if that was how she identifies. For Zelda to be in what the listener called an abusive anti-Semitic relationship with Janusz. Because she says the last we see of Zelda, she's crouched in the bathroom secretly calling Rose, saying, Janusz thinks you are vampires sucking the lifeblood from us. It's played for laughs, but it's not funny. And so we thought that was really interesting,
Yes.
The idea that this trope of Jews as vampires, sucking the lifeblood out of other people, it is an anti-Semitic trope. And the question whether Janusz, coming from Poland, yes?
Yeah, somewhere from Europe.
Might have some ingrained anti-Semitism based on the time in which this series happens. And so, I think that in terms of that relationship, the Weissmans are really utterly dependent on Zelda until she leaves, and then they're totally helpless. And it's really embarrassing. I think it's bad for the Jews because it shows Jews, at least for a certain economic class, to be inept at domestic life and reliant on people in the background. And in fact, when you see that they're incapable of doing things without her, it's true that they are sucking the life out of her. But, we also are uncomfortable with the use of vampires because it's sometimes enacted as an anti-Semitic stand-in for Jews. Then she added, Zelda was happy working for the Weissmans until Janusz started forbidding all contact. And she said that was disturbing. if it was just about their passive aggressive helplessness, another reference could be made. So this listener also added that she says, overall, Midge Maisel was a mitzvah for women. And she added, she got me through breast cancer and the whole clan transported me back to my childhood. I know every one of those characters and love them. So you see, there's criticism and there's also love. It can happen in the same moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Because even in the world of Zelda and Janusz, like Janusz and they fall in love. And then he says I'm going to make sure you don't have to work here ever again. Like he really does see this place as a trap and a terrible place. And she finds joy in it. But then after a while, like even without him, you do see her a little irritated by the job and honestly by the people because they're a lot. And so I think, it does make you think about all of their relationship in it. And so thank you for submitting that. I thought that was such an interesting critique that we hadn't heard yet.
Yeah, one other thing I want to mention about things that I think we could have done without, and I wasn't such a fan of, is this Midge being able to break out of her slot on the Gordon Ford show with only positive consequences. I think we've talked before about how I think this is like magical realism. Like this is like the best possible way it could go. But I think Gordon Ford going from completely, utterly negative, like really raining down the fury of God and trying to use all of his power to make sure that Midge doesn't get to do what she wants on the show. And then she goes rogue and there's no consequences except everybody laughs and thinks she's awesome and they all applaud her. And that's really great. But I feel like that really broke with any kind of reality that would have happened for a single woman in a writer's room, their first female writer who's been on the job much less time than all of the rest of them. And they're just so endlessly happy and supporting of her. With all due respect to our friend Austin Basis, who was with us last time on the show, where we talked about his character Alvin in the writer's room. I think that the writer's room was idealistically supportive in a way I understand that most writers' rooms are not.
I don't actually think they were that supportive. I think they were shocked and confused. And then she was like, thank you for being so happy for me. And then they're just kind of sitting there and waiting to see what happens. And I think at the end, they really do come around because funny is funny, right? Like if you laugh, you can't be like, no, I'm mad that I'm laughing. It's like, no, funny's funny. And even at the end,
people are mad when other people are funny. It does happen.
Totally. No, 100%. I am with you. But like, I think in the end, like, I think they're all happy to get rid of her, right? Like, and even at the end, he says, you're fired. And like, that's it. That's all she needed. She just needed one shot.
Maybe it happened out of order. Like he said, you're fired. And then they said, yay.
Well, who knows? But it's like, I think it didn't matter whether or not it was realistic because I do believe that stuff has happened to Midge once a season. Once a season, she does something crazy groundbreaking that men probably did all the time. It's not like she got this idea from nowhere, right? She just said, I'm going to do it my way. And I feel like there's a respect there, which is probably why he ended up inviting her on the couch afterward. But yeah, definitely, I don't think Midge and Gordon's relationship existed much after. I think she was always a comedian who would come on for 5 minutes and then would leave.
Right. Being invited over to the couch was like a very big thing for the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Like all the comics who were on Carson always talked about how Johnny didn't invite everybody over to the couch. So when you got invited to the couch, that was like your first step on the road to superstardom. So that was a clear invocation there, I think.
Yes, I think professionally they respect each other. And I think he's mad that he didn't have the control to do it himself. Even though he chose to bring her on, I think he wanted to contain her and it just wasn't going to happen. And it was fun seeing that. It was frustrating to see it all play out, but it was fun. And I think we should get to the theme. I think we should get to what this show really is. And then we can, wrap up with our favorite moments all together.
Yes. The E-car, the main point, the essence of this show. What do you think?
I think we can agree that this was a love story between women and work and friendship. And that's it.
And definitely not about parenting.
No. This show, I think, is going to be a historic one. It really does feel different than a lot of shows I've watched. Even if it is like, oh, this bit is kind of like this. Oh, this bit is kind of like that. Like, the idea that it was never to keep the show continuing and end with Susie and Midge laughing on a couch watching Jeopardy. Like, it moved me to tears. Like, may we be so lucky, Esther, that that's
on two
us.
Separate couches in two separate locations.
Separate worlds. Mm-hmm.
Susie and Midge definitely could have benefited from some FaceTime, Skype, WhatsApp action. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was so moving. It was like, your friend doesn't need to be right next to you all the time in order to love them and care about them and spend time with them. Like, you can have all of these things, but at the end of the day, if you still have someone you can call and laugh with, like, that's all that matters. Like, obviously, they've both reached so much success that they're living with this crazy, extravagant life and they can gift each other exotic birds. Like, It's just so nice.
Erin, is this about the fact that I haven't gotten you an exotic bird yet?
I wasn't going to say anything, but if you did get me a red bird, I would call it whore.
Great. Perfect. We were also, when we were talking about this last episode and what this ending most reminded us of, I thought it was kind of similar to the Seinfeld ending, which, spoilers for Seinfeld, but they ended up in a cell talking to each other, about minutia. And that was just the four of them were each other's soulmates ending up in a place where they're doing exactly the same thing they always did. And so in some ways, like, not in a jail cell, but and very free in some ways, both of these women being in their separate lives that they dreamed of and achieved, and still having that connection to each other where they have their same rapport as always. That's what it reminded me of a little bit. But you had a different comment.
Yes, I thought it was like Cheers, but more satisfying, because I hated the end of Cheers. That Sam, okay, so for those of you who don't remember Cheers or whatever, there was this whole Sam and Diane, will they, won't they? She even comes back at the final and you're like, oh, they're going to finally be together. Hooray. And then it doesn't work out. They're all at the bar at the end and Norm says something along the lines of like, yeah, this was always your like true love. And he's implying the bar. And the only reason I think it's like that in Maisel is because she doesn't actually end up with a person. Like, the person she ends up with is Susie, and it's more of like a friendship and like a reminiscent look at all the things we've done. And not so much, will she end up with Joel? Is she married? Do all of her kids fall back in love with her mother and they all have like a great time? Like, it's not that. And I think it's so refreshing that it doesn't have to be that.
Agreed. And I know you won't be surprised when I say that I'm glad she didn't end up with Joel. I think that would have been like a regression. And that although, they are in some ways like really a model of how to do post-divorce parenting, eventually, probably not at the beginning, but they are this example of how to get along with your ex, which I think is really nice. Although maybe don't go to prison. That would be my takeaway. But go to prison for the woman that is the mother of your children instead of, dragging her into it. Okay, that's something. But again, listeners, please don't go to prison.
Yeah, don't.
So I'm glad that she's not with Joel. And I'm glad that they didn't feel the need to pair her up with anybody, because really, who could match her? And the only answer is Susie. So you're talking about the Cheers ending, and that also reminded me of the Sex and the City ending, because, the Sex and the City ending, it's like, oh, who is their soulmate? New York City. New York City's everybody's soulmate. I'll be like, okay, great. We knew that was happening. But
on that, isn't it crazy that and I was thinking about this too, and I thought of Sex and the City specifically. I can only name 2 shows where the end is, okay, a guy might be involved, but at the end, it's truly about meeting up with your friends at the very end. And Sex and the City is one of them, right? A big reveal, though, in the end of Sex and the City is finding out Big's name. That's a big thing.
Who cares?
I know, but like that was a huge moment. Do you remember? Like everybody was talking about it. His name is freaking John. That's not even an original name. But
don't
aside
get me
from
started.
But I know we were not friends when the Sex and the City finale came out, so we couldn't talk about it. But like the end is not the name. She's walking to meet up with her friends. And that is the important bit. But like there are so many shows that try to be progressive in that they don't, like Friends might be a part of it, but they're always ending up, even Friends, they get married, they couple up and they leave. And it is very depressing for friends who want to stay together long in life. And now I feel like in the last couple of years, we're seeing shows and movies specifically tailor themselves to Friends and the friendship love and not who are they going to end up with. Even last night in Ted Lasso's finale, I'm not going to spoil anything. Yeah. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think they are falling into the new wave of it doesn't matter who they end up with. There is a bigger meaning to all of this.
Right.
Yes.
There's more important things than the wedding cake.
Than the romantic relationship. And not that it's not important. It's just that we always see it to the point where we are like, okay, a little segue, like, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to keep it to Maisel, but people still think, oh, she should have ended up with Ben. She should have ended up with Gordon. She should have ended up with Joel or whoever of these husbands. And it's like, why? Because it worked so well the first time? Like,
and finding a romantic partner was never her goal.
No.
Like, throughout all of it. Like, she met somebody, she happened to like them. They were maybe together for a hot minute, and then that was it. She didn't really need that. What she was completely driven by was this drive to achieve comedy superstardom. And that was the only thing she wanted to do, and she got it. And she also got Susie in the bargain, who also wanted to completely give herself to Midge as a project, but she also had other clients. But at the end of it, you don't see Susie on the phone with Sophie, whatever her name was, or Lennon, or any of the famous people she's represented. Like, she's on the phone watching Jeopardy with Midge. So that's really a love story that we can celebrate also.
And I don't know why we're so surprised either. Because Gilmore Girls ended the same way. It's still at the forefront was about their ambition and their goals. And it's like, I'm glad Midge stayed true to that. I'm glad it didn't get reduced to the company of Joel or the company of whatever. You know, even her kids. Like, someone told me it was really sad walking through that mansion, that completely empty mansion with a dining room for 20 people that no one was there. And I was like, yeah, but also like it could possibly be a weekday, right? Like, who knows? Maybe she does dine with people all the time and throws lavish parties still. But, you know, in her spare time, she wants to be in that little nook watching Jeopardy on her TV with Susie. Like, maybe that's her comfort space.
Well, we also saw that she has this team that books her places. And there was a Tuesday that was unbooked, right? And she was like, why is it unbooked? Like, she likes to keep herself busy. And I think part of it is because this big empty house is a place for her stuff. I don't know how much she's there. If I had a place like that, I would be hosting parties all the time, just so you know, if anybody wants to give me a place like that. But you know, that's not her priority. It's never been her priority. She's come into her own. You know, she's nice. I guess it's nice of her that she flies to Israel in a helicopter, but she takes a helicopter from wherever she was before that to see Ethan on the kibbutz. That's nice. We don't see her interacting with Esther at all. We just hear Esther's report of the way she interacts with her. And she does it in a very frenetic way that we identify as having been inherited in the family of, you know, too much talking. You know, you're in the wrong family, kid. That's right. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that we could drill down on and tell you why we like them or don't like them.
Before we say goodbye to this show, Esther, Are there any moments now that we've seen it all that you are excited to like go back to?
Great question, Erin. I think that the flash forwards were a point of contention for a lot of people at the beginning of the season. I loved them because I thought we had a chance to meet the kids grown up and finally get their say on things. And the one thing that made me confused about is I didn't understand, even though they gave you the year, it was hard for me to plot in where in the narrative that we've already seen, like where does everything fit in terms of the narrative of Mitch's life?
Right.
And I said to you when we were talking about this, like, I wish the internet would just like put together a timeline or supercut of the episodes in chronological order. And you're like, oh, Decider did it. And that's great. We're gonna post a link to that in our show notes. But it was really a very well done job of like the different moments in Midge's life and where all the flash forwards fit in there.
Yeah, I did like that. And it also is interesting too, because it feels like we were always getting there. Like I was rewatching a couple random episodes throughout the season, and it always felt like they're going to flash forward. They're going to show us who these people become.
Yeah, I think, also Ethan ending up in rabbinical school is interesting. It's not just going to Israel because he's lost. It's like part of his rabbinical school situation. And that's funny because, of course, in the first episode, we got the rabbi. It's like now they always got the rabbi, but nobody's ever home. So I don't know how that fleshes out. But I wonder if I were Esther, I am Esther, but if I were Esther Maisel, would I be upset that my brother got a helicopter and I didn't get a helicopter? I mean, I'm like, Esther's like doing what? She's like she's like curing cancer and solving some sort of physics equation, and her mother doesn't come to see her. So that was a little bit of an imbalance that I noticed that I was like a little bit on.
Yeah, I think maybe instead of spending flash forward moments with, all the time with Rose, like that whole Rose scene where her business is just super expensive. Like I would have liked to see adult Midge and adult Esther interact, because I don't think we saw that.
We didn't. And I have, hashtag justice for Esther's, happening for me. Like I always want to see Esther's get their due.
Yeah. Every one of her shows has this, whatever your relationship is with your mother is going to be different than what your child is, like what your relationship is with your kid. And it's so interesting to me that like Rose and Midge have this like shorthand where sometimes they completely get each other. When it comes to fashion and like the material things, they get it. But then when it comes with like the deeper meaning, they just don't see eye to eye. And so I'm surprised, and not surprised, but I guess disappointed that didn't transfer over with Midge and Esther. Which, how could it if she was thinking about herself and then she couldn't be there for her kids to have these conversations? And that show's not what this is. Yeah. But I'm always fascinated by why we didn't get a scene showing a little bit of that. We just get 2 interviews separately of them talking about each other. And maybe that's all we get because that's what it is. They don't have a relationship.
Well, I think now that we've seen the whole arc of that 5th season and we've seen Abe, his interest in Ethan, and then replaced by his interest in Esther, and Esther talks about her grandfather a little bit, I think we should go back to that episode and see Esther's and Ethan's segments again, because I think we might have different ideas about how that registers in light of the end of the season instead of just the beginning of the season. I think something, it's good to have a text like this show because there's so much richness to it, both visually and in terms of character and in terms of plot. And so it's just a really interesting series. And perhaps when you and I are in the 10th year of this podcast, which will happen probably sooner than we believe, then we'll do a revisit to Mrs. Maisel on the 10th anniversary of its ending.
I love that. Do you think this is a show you're going to rewatch from the beginning again?
Possibly. I mean, I already started in preparation for this episode of ours. I watched the first 2 episodes of the series again. And, there are parts I would want to watch again. And there are probably parts I would skip. Like that industrial episode, we'll probably skip that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, we have fast forward. So we don't have to skip whole episodes. We can just fast forward to the parts we want to see again. But, we didn't mention, and I really should mention, one of the scenes that I really loved was the funeral in the previous season. When they had the funeral for Jackie. And I thought Susie in that was amazing. And Alex Borstein was amazing in that. And I think that any time that Alex Borstein departs from this kind of very gruff, very untouchable, unemotional space, or where her primary emotion is frustration or aggressiveness, which I guess is not a emotion. But when she leaves that capacity and ends up really feeling something in the moment, I just find it very moving. And I'm just a huge fan, Alex Borstein, if you're listening to this, which I know you're not because you don't watch the show either. And I think she said she was going to watch the show from the beginning with her daughter at some point, but they haven't done it yet.
I love that. I think that's a great idea for them. I'm sad this show is over. I think it's like in my list now. Like, I think it's like one of my favorite shows ever.
That is a shocking development, Erin. I would never have guessed that.
Okay, but there are times where like I've been really upset by it. But when you look at it finished from 2017 to now, and yes, all the sentimental whatever aside, like I do think this is a good show. Like I think, and someone even said sometimes I think the writing of the show is funnier than the stand-up comic bits that were written. Like it just feels 100%. Really smart.
It really is much funnier in the beats of the show rather than Midge's stand-up routine. That's for sure.
It just feels like enjoyable. Like it is an enjoyable show that I think because of it, we got a lot of Jewish content from it.
Yes, I think that Maisel and Transparent were 2 of the shows that really helped build Amazon, it's called Prime Video now, but Amazon Studios as a viable space of TV development and production and distribution. And I love that both of those shows had such like substantial Jewish content. Mm-hmm. And I think that showing those kinds of specific stories and having them resonate across an audience that wasn't just Jews, like the Jews in the world are not enough for Amazon to be like, oh, well, all the Jews watched it, so we could just renew it. Like clearly it was resonating across a wider swath of the market, right? So I think that the fact that those 2 shows were, very specific in their attention to Judaism was a vote of confidence for telling Jewish stories and probably for telling all, kind of ethnically specific stories as well. I haven't done a complete breakdown of all of Amazon's shows that they've released, but certainly Maisel was one of the important ones in cementing their position in this market.
100%. I don't want it to be over. I know we have to end this podcast. And then once we end this episode, I mean, we'll talk about Maisel again. There's so much to talk about, even though, it's over. But, we won't have a new season or a new trailer or anything.
But we will always have our theories about what happens in the time periods that are not represented. We'll always have our questions that are not answered and will remain unanswered, So like how Ethan transitions from being in the happy group when he's in school, and then he goes to rabbinical school in Israel. That doesn't seem like a happy move. So I want to know more about that journey. As my mother used to say, being a rabbi is no job for a nice Jewish boy. So that's a question that I have that's still out there. Also, where is Susie's plunger? I don't know. I feel like plunger needs its own cartoon. I think we talked about this, when we talked about possible spinoffs, like maybe a cartoon of Susie and her plunger. Astrid, I would love to know more about where she's at, and her husband, Noah, who's Midge's brother. We kind of didn't get anything from them toward the end. We had them at a dinner where they acted frenetic and kind of forgettable, actually. And then, of course, our beloved, what's her name? Imogene. Because it's Midge and Imogene and Aster, like the names all sometimes like get mixed up.
I bet you we're going to see these names come back in like baby names. They're going to name their kids these things.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm wondering if Esther did cure cancer, because that'd be cool. And very happy to have an Esther do it, because I'm not going to be able to do that in my lifetime, sadly.
Well, that's okay. We didn't need you to cure cancer. That's a lot.
Okay. Yeah, it is a lot. I can produce a podcast, though.
If you want to, we'll be really happy for you. But I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
I mean, if I manage to cure cancer...
School is involved also.
I know, but we're all doing something wrong if that happens, because that would just be like me making an iced coffee and like then all of a sudden putting some sort of different sweetener in it and some cinnamon. And then somebody's like, hey, wait, that's the mixture right there. That's going to cure cancer.
Esther, I think you're describing opening a coffee shop. I think that's what you want to do, really.
Right. Maybe that should be my new goal. So how are we supposed to live without Maisel, Erin? What are you going to do?
I don't know, because Succession, also over. Ted Lasso, also over. Barry, also over. I don't know. I guess we just have to wait for the next round of television. Although, you know what I am excited for? I'm excited for the Emmys this year. Hopefully the writer's strike has ended. But I'm really excited for the Emmys, because then we get to relive all of these great shows that just ended. We get to relive them again,
right.
And celebrate the work that they did. And I think that's how we get to keep them alive for a little longer.
Right. So don't cry because it's over. Just laugh and enjoy the fact that it happened.
That's stuff that people say at the end of summer camp when they're about to leave, which I guess is fair, because it felt like being at summer camp watching this show.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about this enough for now, Erin. And I think starting next week, well, we may have one more Maisel conversation on the horizon, but we are going to mostly move on from the show to some other things in popular culture that we want to share with you. So we're looking forward to that, even as we are saying goodbye and as we are saying thank you and good night.
This has been The Bagel Report, a production of Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, and a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Thank you to Lev Gringaz, our producer from Jew Folk Inc., David A.M. Walensky and Andrew Essenston, and Danny Lipsky for creating our logo. You can find us wherever podcasts are listened to. Connect with us on social, on Twitter, at Esther K, at Eben Moshe, and at The Bagel Report. On Instagram at Esther Kostanowitz, at Eben Moshe, and TBR the Pod, and by emailing us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. Now go and watch something interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it next time on The Bagel Report.